In a world where Africans have lost their roots, it has become of vital importance to document our ways. In an effort to reverse the brainwashing of the past, where we were made to believe our ways are demonic, we are pressed to create dignified and respectful platforms to unpack our spiritual ways. Moya Ulight, Moya Ubright. Welcome to another episode of Moya. It's always a pleasure to be with you guys. Thank you so much for all the support that you're giving us. The channel is growing. Thank you for liking, for sharing, and for subscribing. And remember, the bank details are on screen right now so that you can do the right thing. But the reason that we are here is because you are doing the right thing and more episodes are coming. It's a great privilege to host some of the guests that we get here today. And I hope you guys are cognizant of the fact that we're having really high-end African scholars and thought leaders. And I want you to embrace this platform and learn. Right now, it's the election season 2024 in South Africa. So we as a mass, we don't know what's happening. We are quite illiterate voters. I mean, we go with the hype, and it's shown in how things have played out. And I hope I'm not offending anybody, but it is what it is. We are here 30 years later. We haven't made much improvements, especially for African people in terms of employment, in terms of land. There are many issues affecting us. So I've asked some important scholars to come in today to come and help us unpack some of these issues. We're going to start with Dr. Zulumathabo Zulu. Thank you, Dr. Zulu, for coming through. Maybe a quick, brief introduction as to who you are, so I don't offend people by not giving you the correct welcome.
Siyathokoza makhosi. Thank you for this opportunity. We are very excited to be here. And of course, I'm Dr. Zulumathabo Zulu. So I am many things. I'm a published author. One of my books is called the Dictionary of Mathematics, The Sacred Knowledge of the Desert, African Philosophical Transcendence. And I run an institute, Militarization University Research Institute, based here in Sandton. I'm a research scientist, and we specialize in indigenous African knowledge. So basically, African origin of knowing. And basically, we are in three domains. One domain is cosmology, and the other domain is meta science, which is really about strategic knowledge of science. And the other domain is metaphysics, which is about the scientific study of reality.
And we've got a young intellectual from Zimbabwe, very political, very vocal, Rutendo Matinyarare. I know, I'm so sorry.
Well done.
You know, it's so funny because we're all Africans, but even amongst our cultures, like we're like, oh, we don't speak like this. Okay, how do we put these? But anyways, thank you so much for coming through, Rutendo. Can you give us a brief introduction as well?
Yes, and after that introduction by Dr. Zulu, I don't even know if I can introduce myself anymore. Rutendo Matinyarare. I am the chairman of Zimbabwe Anti-Sanctions Movement. It's actually a movement that is looking at fighting imperialism on the African continent. But as we're saying that the problems that we have in Zimbabwe is one of those places that has been attacked by imperialism for taking land. We have to start at home, fix our home, and then begin to look at Africa after we've done what we need to do at home. I'm also a marketing strategist for Frontline Strat Marketing. It's about changing the narrative of Africa, changing the presentation of Africa, changing the presentation of brand Africa to the world, because we always have relied on other people to tell our story. And we want to change that. My agency is about telling Africa's story from our perspective and projecting Africa the way we want to be projected.
Beautiful, beautiful work. Dr. Zulu, I mean, he's already touched on some important things, and I saw you nodding there. I don't know if you want to put in something. Something must have moved inside of you when he's talking about some of these issues.
Especially when he says he's involved in the fighting against imperialism. That is so profound. And we need more of you, my brother.
Thank you.
Because, you know, a very important thing in our culture is what we call isibaya. In Sotho, they call it lesaka. This is where, the cows, the goats, they all stay inside this thing. And for us, that is very spiritual because the ancestors are there. If you look at our culture, especially Zulu kings, when they're going to be initiated or when they're going to be installed, they first have to be introduced into this isibaya. Wow. And that is land, you see. And land is what the imperialists want to take away from us. And we must restore that. So we give thanks to that in Mfowethu Mohle. Yeah.
So, we are in South Africa approaching the elections. And I don't know, Rutendo, with your history and your past elections, is there some comparisons you'd like to make to, because I'm sure you've looked at both scenarios and are seeing some alignments and some, so can you maybe unpack that for us?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to be aware of as Africans is that recolonization 2.0 is back. The West want to recolonize Africa. They want to take over the continent again. And they have raised this generation of neoliberals who don't stand for any political ideology that serves Africans. We've got this hanging ideology that believes in serving the world order without looking at what's good for Africans. And South Africa is at that point now. And what I like is that Zimbabwe had its elections last year. There was an agenda to remove the Zimbabwean government because of what it stands for. Its empowerment and emancipation of its people through the land, where they've had 22 years of sanctions to deliberately try and stop that government from delivering services to its people so that the people can rebel against that government and remove it. And South Africa is exactly at that point, where ever since we started having the new ANC government, there's been an agenda to sabotage its work, sabotage its ability to deliver even electricity, water, healthcare, everything. There has been an agenda to try and stop that from happening. Now, we will not remove the aspect that both in Zimbabwe and South Africa, there is corruption, there is human error, there is incompetence. But we must never forget the superstructure of imperialism that continues to underlie what it is that we're doing. The tax base, the business base still remains a white tax base and business base, and the control of factors of production, particularly in South Africa, still remains in white hands. And so they continue to be the grandparents or the benefactors to the government. And they can influence and have been influencing and sabotaging the way that this government delivers its services. And there is an intentional sabotage of this particular government to remove it. Now, whether we can blame this government for thinking that it can trust an enemy, a criminal of apartheid, a criminal against humanity, is another discussion altogether, because we should always never forget to locate who the enemy is. Our enemy as Africans is always going to be the white superstructure of racism that survives off the exploitation of African peoples. And that's what you guys are facing. They want to remove the ANC. They want to bring apartheid back through democracy. They want black South Africans and black people to vote for white people back into power so that they can begin their project that they left back in the day, exploitation of Africans, exploitation of African resources for their own comfort. But what also comes with that is an intentional idea to destroy and eliminate the black body. And this is the warning that I have to black people who will be voting this year, that irrespective of what it is that you're angry about, remember who it is that you can trust.
Shucks.
Remember who it is that you want to vote for your own interest. Because it's all good to be persuaded to vote for what you think is efficiency or better management. But never forget, apartheid failed for 340 years. They failed to deliver anything for black people. They made black people miserable. The black tax you pay today is because of the legacy of apartheid. Never be persuaded to think that they are better governors because they failed for 340 years. Most of us can't even survive. Xhosa people cannot survive in Western Cape. They work in Western Cape for a certain period. They go to school there. But the moment they get to a certain part where they want to go above the ceiling, they can no longer survive in Western Cape. They have to leave. That's why there's less black people in Western Cape than colours. That doesn't make sense. This is an African country. Why can't black people survive in Western Cape? It's because the DA and white people do not allow black people to flourish because they exploit them. I want my people to remember that, irrespective of your differences. ANC has raised 7 million people into a middle class out of poverty. They've created 19 million black, colored, Indian millionaires. Never forget about that. They have their mistakes, but they have empowered a great generation of young people who today can take care of their families. They've been able to take themselves out of poverty. They're taking families out of poverty. So they've got their weaknesses, but let's remember their successes. That's just what I want black people to think. Let's not fragment our vote.
Dr. Zulu?
Oh, Marcos, no, very, very good points. Indeed, it is very critical for us to know our struggle indeed, and to know what it is all about. When you look at colonialism, it is about one thing, and that is natural resources of the country. Anyway, the genitalia of the white man gets hard at the natural resources.
Yes.
That's what it's all about. And they will the beautiful land. And so that's what it's all about, fundamentally. So even the imperialism that my brother mentioned, it is about natural resources. Even around the world, you look in Palestine, it is about the land, the natural resources. You look in Russia and Ukraine, it is about the land, because Russia is the biggest country on the planet, and is also, I think it controls more than 90% of the natural resources of Europe. They want that. They want to dismember that country. So we are faced with that. So it's very critical to remember that, and which is why our constitution in the land of Azania, South Africa, is actually a constitution based on duplicity. So that means that it has got an element of treachery there. Especially I'm talking here about clause 25. And it's very interesting that when you read clause 25, they don't use the word land there. They talk about property. And when you read it, property, you start thinking about property could be a house, could be whatever, a piece of property. But actually, they're talking about land, but they use the word property. Because they don't want us to understand the profoundness of that. And it basically says that the land that was acquired by colonial conquest cannot be given back to the African natives. That's essentially what it says. But it says it in a very coded way, right? It says, property. The government cannot take property away, from owners of property, stuff like that. If it has to do that for public interest, there has to be compensation. And it actually even says that the compensation must be commensurate with market prices. How about that? So in other words, we have to pay astronomical prices for the land that they took under the barrel of the gun.
For free.
For free. And it's the same story. I lived with Zimbabweans in northern Botswana, especially in Ndebele's, who became refugees as a result of the 1983-84 civil war in Zimbabwe, the 5th Brigade. So a lot of Ndebele's lived in northern Botswana, just north of Francistown. And we used to discuss this issue a lot. In fact, one of my books is called A Woman in the Bush. There's a photograph of me there with the great Joshua Nkomo. Because first what happened in I think that was 1988, the present president of Zimbabwe, Emerson Mnangagwa, in 1988, he was the Minister of Intelligence, Security and Intelligence. So he was sent by the Zimbabwe government under the great president, Robert Mugabe, to come to Botswana to persuade the Zimbabweans there to return to Zimbabwe. Right, and I believe there is a photograph of me and him taken by the local newspaper. What do they call it, Mehi? And then there was, of course, and then following year, towards the end of '88, then came Joshua Nkomo, who was, of course, the vice president of Zimbabwe at that particular time. So there's this, I've got this photograph with him on this, and we used to have very comprehensive discussion about land, because in the case of Zimbabwe, they had the concept of Lancaster Agreement, and I read that Lancaster document and even wrote an article about it. And it's interesting that when you look at the agenda, because what happened is that to have that Lancaster Agreement, what's the president of Zimbabwe, Kenneth Kaunda, he played a big role there.
Zambia.
Yeah, Zambia, yes. Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia played a big role in the liberation of Zimbabwe, because Kenneth Kaunda, this is a best kept secret, he was a dance partner of Margaret Thatcher. How about that? And I believe if you can do Google, you do a Google search, Kenneth Kaunda, dance partner, Margaret Thatcher. I think you'll see, and you look at images, I'm sure you'll see an image, is a black and white image where he's dancing together with Margaret Thatcher. So he arranged for what was called Commonwealth Conference in Zambia, in Lusaka. And that's when the agreement was made that, and I think that was 1979, and of course, negotiations began there. But the point I wanted to make is that in the agenda of this negotiation, the land question was removed. It was not part of that. It was part of the compromise that, okay, if you want us to talk about this, we cannot talk about land. The land will come in later. We will raise money, and then we will compensate the white farmers, and Zimbabwe will get their land back. And that never happened, of course. So land is really at the heart of this. That's why I liked Brother Rutendo when he talks about the anti-imperialism. That's very critical. We have to do that. So now, yes, now we're facing elections in the land of Azania, South Africa, and which is great. But for me, it is a bittersweet moment, because the political process that we are going to be participating in is not our design. This is a political system designed from outside. So it's still a colonial system in that sense. Democracy is a governance system that comes from outside, that was imposed upon us. If you look at Chinese, they wrote their own constitution in 1949, after they got their independence. They wrote their own constitution, not in English, but in Chinese language, in Mandarin. And there was no colonizer during the writing of the constitution. Contrast that with South Africa. When the constitution was drafted, the colonizer was part of that. So what do you expect?
Rutendo?
Yeah, absolutely. And what is interesting is that what many people don't understand is that when people are not emancipated, when they don't own factors of production, they are forced to become slaves of the owners of production so that they can feed themselves. What is unspoken in that is that then the people themselves become property of the owners of factors of production. And so this is what is never said in South Africa, that the people of South Africa, the black indigents of this country, are actually property of the white owners. That's why you see our mothers are still going to work in suburbs, catching buses. A lot of them can't even walk properly. Their legs are tired. Their legs are destroyed from slavery. They still continue to go and slave in the suburbs because they've become the property of these owners. And so this constitution that we have in South Africa, known as one of the best constitutions in the world, is actually one of the most terrible constitutions in the world because it has legalized an illegality. It has legalized the dispossession of Africans and has kept the wealth and unjust enrichment in the hands of white people legitimately. And in that process, it has also disempowered the Africans of South Africa from being able to get restitution in integrum from the crime against humanity that was perpetuated against them. Our mothers continue to have to catch buses, to look after grown children who cannot get jobs in an economy that was deliberately built to create a slave class and not to create jobs to make people human beings or to emancipate human beings. We're now having the removal of BEE, which was a form of a way to try and emancipate those who were dispossessed. And all of a sudden now we've got court cases, we've got courts making rulings that are now making BEE something that has to be removed so that there is fair competition in a country where the factors of production are 93% owned by the colonizer and what I call their administrators. These are the races like the Indians who also have benefited from this colonial system and become the administrators of this system. So if we want justice for black people, this constitution has got to be rewritten. It has got to be relooked at. But I have got an indictment for those people that study law. The other day I heard Mcebo Dlamini saying that one of the most difficult courses they ever did at university was property law. And my question is, how do you study property law in order to maintain the property ownership of that which was earned during colonialism? How do people go and study that and then call themselves lawyers and then wear those gowns and wear those wigs to go into a court to ratify colonial property rights, and you call yourself a lawyer? You call yourself an African jurist who is supposed to look at fairness, justice, and equality, but you go into courts every single day. As a member of the EFF, Ngukai Toby goes into courts every day to reinforce the property rights of whites. He goes to ratify the property ownership of theft. And then they come here, they stand in front of us and tell us that they want empowerment. How do you want empowerment when you go and ratify laws of a criminal? How do you go and use Roman Dutch law and then qualify in it, and then you go into courts and continue to create precedents on it, case law on it, but you complain about the colonial system? They are part and parcel of the problem. And the lawyers are particularly the biggest problem that we have in a country. So you have someone who's part of the EFF, someone like the senior advocate, Dalimpofu. We asked Dalimpofu, in these courts, how much of the colonial system have you changed? How much of the constitution have you changed? How much of these injustices have you reversed through the courts? You will actually get to see that they've actually created more injustices through case law that they participate in every single time they walk into those courts. So our challenge has to be with that legal law class. They're the same people that went to international court now, with the International Court of Justice, to try and make sure that an injustice that is taking place in Palestine doesn't continue. But why have we not gone to look at the injustice of this very same constitution? Why have we not gone to look at the injustice of some of the racist decisions that are made in South African courts that ratify racism, that continue to ensure that whites continue to control this country? Why haven't they been taken for review in those places? Because the Judicial Commission of South Africa has got judges that are powers unto themselves. They make decisions to maintain a world order, an order of white supremacy. Why is it that their judgments are not taken on review in higher courts, particularly here, the African Court of Human Rights and People's Rights, and then after that to the International Court of Justice, because some of the decisions made by courts in this country continue to be apartheid laws, and we have got a convention that is supposed to punish apartheid and to prevent apartheid, but we have laws that continue to be made in this country that ratify apartheid. Why are we not challenging? Lastly, We have a situation in South Africa where Black Land First know that the black land issue, the land issue is a black versus white issue.
Yeah.
They created a political party to try and take back land and give it back to its people. A white person wanted to join the party. They refused to have that white person join in because they understand that their cause, what they're fighting for, is uniquely black. And the IEC of South Africa removed them from the ballot box. They banned them. Why would that be when our issue in South Africa is a race issue? Trying to be non-racial is to maintain a racist order and to stop the challenging of that racist order. Why would that be? And these are the things that we need to start questioning and asking and challenging our lawyers, that you cannot be lawyers who administer the maintenance of apartheid. You've got to be lawyers who challenge the existence of apartheid and create a new legal system, new precedents in the courts, and new court decisions that work for black people.
You know, the lawyers always complain, which it's not their job to create the laws. They just interpret it. So it's interesting what you're saying. But
Before you go, but it's weird that only black lawyers say they are there to interpret the law, but white lawyers are consistently going to court to make decisions or to push judges to make decisions that create case law, which actually is one of the sources of the law of this country.
And
so it's
precedents.
Not true. And precedents.
Yep.
100%.
Yep.
And they contribute to the statutes. They contribute to what parliament creates. Where are the black lawyers when our parliaments are making laws, when they're creating bills? Where are they? And then when it comes to constitutional elements that they're not happy with, they're also the ones that will talk to a parliament and whip people into line to get the 2/3 majority that is required to change the constitution if they had to. So why aren't black lawyers doing that?
Dr. Zulu, oh,
My
okay,
course.
yes, you were saying something. I think you wanted to respond to that. Oh, okay, I was about to ask you, Uti, can you unpack a little bit what's happening with Israel and Palestine and this judgment that just came out? What does it mean to us on the ground, young people who don't know what's happening, and what's the importance of everything?
Marcos, and I want to also comment on what the brother has just made, some very good
Yes.
points there, and then I can come to that.
Yes.
You see, and I totally understand the jeopardy of the lawyers. You see, there's a Sesotho expression that says, "Lehlaku haluwele hole lesifate," meaning, ngesizulu singathi iqabunga aluweli kude nesihlahla, meaning the leaf does not fall far from the tree. Because you see, the leaf carries the DNA of the tree. So, and what I mean by this is that the graduate of law school carries the DNA of the school where he comes from. So cannot deviate from that. See, and that's the issue. And which is why the change has to happen at a design level. And the design level is the constitution. So you're going to need a new constitution. And I hear my brother makes a good point about maybe why don't we, let's say, like in the case of International Court of Justice, and maybe bring these issues there at that level. But I personally don't think that will actually bear fruit. The Constitution is written here. We just need to bring an end to it. You see, Niger, those young guys there, they're in their 30s, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That's exactly what they did.
100%.
Exactly. That's exactly what they did. They simply were tired of the corrupt political system, and they took over. Of course, they used a coup in that particular case. They kicked out the French. They cancelled their contracts in terms of mineral extraction. And then from there, they suspended the constitution, and they came up with their own system. So, and that's the only way you are going to change things, because you must remember that a colonial mind is not amenable to negotiation. You can come and try to negotiate. It doesn't work like that. I mean, you look in South Africa, 1994. Of course, it's hailed as a miracle, and maybe to some extent it is a miracle. But check this out. there was the concept of reconciliation. Only black people forgave white people.
Who didn't apologize.
Who did not apologize. And I understand why white people did not apologize. Because it is in their DNA not to do that. And of course, Mandela, a lot of people will tell you that Mandela is the god of the white man. Because Mandela is highly celebrated among white people. Mm-hmm. Right? And I respect that. But check this out. They did not they did not apologize to him. They did not propose to make amends with the people of this land. They did not do that. Now he's dead. Agaseko. It will never happen. Forget it. So going forward, we have to come with our own change, and we don't need permission from anyone. So talking about that, like we are going for elections. Now I hear there's a new political party by the name of Umkhonto Wesizwe. Now, for me, that is an interesting development. That is a potential for revolutionary change. And I'll tell you why. You've got a lot of political parties. Actually, I understand that we have like more than 300 political parties. I could not believe. Lots of political parties. Now, a political party essentially at a fundamental level is based on ideology, political ideology. Now, what is an ideology? Ideology is a set of ideas. Okay. Now, Umkhonto Wesizwe, what is it at a fundamental level? Umkhonto Wesizwe, including APLA, these are cadres. These are emancipation cadres. These are people who carry battle scars in the fight against colonialism, against apartheid. Now, here's the question. What is a scar? A scar is reality. Whilst ideology is an idea, a scar is reality. So meaning that a politician has to make a lot of political speeches to convince you. But a cadre only needs to remove their shirt, and then you see the scar, and then you are persuaded. See that? The only important thing, we need to see Umkhonto, AMK cadres and APLA cadres come together, because that is going to be a very powerful message to the masses to say that we are united, because unity is something that has been eluding us. Yeah. You see that? So that's what I see as a potential, at least at a design level, at a fundamental level. Right? I hear, this organization is growing. So I don't know. I mean, it was announced when? December 16?
16, yeah.
December 16 is very profound, by the way. Umkhonto Wesizwe was established in December 16. December 16 is what used to be called Dingan's Day, isn't it? Yes. It's the day of liberation. That's why they established it on December 16. And it was inspired by the Sharpeville massacre that took place the previous year, 1960. You see that? So I understand that after announcing Umkhonto Wesizwe on December 16, 2023, in about 2 weeks, this organization had more than 3 million signed up members on their website. I think each one has to pay something like 10 rand. I could not believe that. Because if you look at a political party like EFF has got 1 million members. It took them 10 years to have 1 million members. Umkhonto Wesizwe 3 million in 2 weeks? That is unheard of. So we need to, there's something here that, and now I hear, I don't know, I hear some people, I was talking to some people just last week, they say now they've got more than 10 million members. And it's only about a month, 3 weeks. So maybe it has to do with the battle scars. You remember that concept? Because you see, a church is based on dogma. What is dogma? Dogma is an idea. That's why you need belief to believe this idea. But you see, a cultural knowledge is based on reality. It's based on umbeleko, muhubu, the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord is real. It's not an idea. You see how powerful is that? Which is why we have these rituals of mbeleko. When a child turns, after he's born, turns a certain age, we have something called isiko lombeleko, where we are gonna, slaughter maybe a goat, an animal, and the Suzo Sevens is inyongo, stuff like that. But I'm just making a point that in these new elections, we are gonna have a contrast between ideas, political ideology, and reality. And and I personally believe that they must forget about negotiations. You cannot negotiate. It's like the buffalo trying to negotiate with the lion. You see, you can't do that. Togoza Makos.
And that's where my worry is with Mkhonto Sizwe, because I think the figurehead that is sitting behind Mkhonto Sizwe is Jacob Zuma. And Jacob Zuma has the battle scars. But a lot of us have asked the question, Tata, you have the battle scars, you went to this war, but why did you sit in Kodesa silently? Why did you allow these negotiations where power was kept by people that you had defeated in war? Now, I need to stress this. Many people think that the settlement of South Africa was a negotiated settlement. That is what the Boers and the whites want us to believe. They were defeated in Angola. They were defeated in Mozambique. They were defeated in Zimbabwe. They were defeated in Namibia. That's why they had to retreat. You don't retreat after you've won. You don't retreat after you've had a draw. You retreat after you've been defeated. The Boers retreated from Angola. They retreated from Namibia. They retreated from Mozambique, where they had their proxies. They retreated from Zimbabwe because they had been defeated. And they had to come back home. Now, the question is, once you've been defeated, where you were holding territory as a buffer from your enemies, what does that mean? It means that your enemy can now come and attack you on your home soil because you no longer have that buffer to protect you. And instead of that happening, instead of the Cubans, the Zimbabweans, the Angolans coming to attack South Africa, the Boers said, let's negotiate. Let's talk. And the first two people to start negotiating were Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma. Now, if you've got the battle scars, where you've won a battle, why do you negotiate from a point of a loser's perspective, which is what happened? Why do you leave some of your principles that we want the land? We want our brothers and sisters who were killed to be avenged. And we want to hold those that were killing people accountable. Why do you leave and relinquish that power and allow these people to tell you how to run your terms and conditions? That's what we want to know. Number two, why still don't we know who killed Chris Hani? Baba knows the truth. He keeps threatening to bring this information out. When will he bring it out? Because these are the clutches that we're supposed to use for the negotiation process, or, like you said, no negotiation to take power. So my issue is, if he continues to be a person who compromises with an enemy, who destroyed him, by the way, then my question is, how good is he as a leader who has battle scars? We are told that when Putin, there's a time Putin had a meeting with Jacob Zuma, and he said to Jacob, listen here, you run the country. You must arrest each and every one of these white monopoly capitalists, put them in jail, then bring them out one by one and begin to have a discussion with them about the role that they must play in the economy. Putin did it in Russia. Zuma hesitated. And all those hesitations came back to bite him. Now, what we want to know is, Tata, you are a soldier. Are you going to behave like a soldier? Because soldiers don't hesitate. When you have an opportunity to destroy the enemy, you destroy the enemy. We are in this position because people like Jacob Zuma, who have got the battle scars, there's a flat that was bombed in Harare, intentionally trying to kill Jacob Zuma after a bomb was put in a TV. He survived that. For a person who survived that with an enemy who he knew would do anything to kill him, he shouldn't be compromising. And he compromised when he was part and parcel of the ANC. Is he going to continue the compromise now? Because CODESA must be reversed, without a doubt. The sunset clauses must be reversed. Those that were behind the death of Chris Hani, the truth must come out, because the truth will set us free. And all these agreements that were made for these people who were apartheid criminals to keep what it is that they end through apartheid, all that must be reversed. I wanted to say one last thing. People never understand why Europeans did not apologize for apartheid. They didn't apologize for apartheid because their ancestors took an oath to come to Africa, undertake what is called the doctrine of discovery, take the land and enslave the people into perpetuity. This was 1454. That doctrine, that oath, is the oath that has been passed down for generation to generation. And the current whites we live with have made the same oath to enslave, take the land into perpetuity. It's not a mistake. They might say that, no, we are not our ancestors, we're not responsible for what our ancestors, they are, because they took the same oath and they maintained the same oath. That's why they've never given back what is not theirs, because in reality they believe it is theirs by conquest. And we need to begin to understand that, and we begin to need to know that if we're going to reverse this, we need to do what needs to happen to take back what is ours. They are not our friends. They will never be our friends. They have taken an oath, a blood oath, to hold this land into perpetuity, and it's up to us to take it back.
Marcos.
Yes.
No, very, 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 very powerful point. And, you know, when a white mother is breastfeeding the white boy, she will say, just out of the blue, she will say, the black man is the enemy. And he internalizes that. You know, there's something about breastfeeding. The breastfeeding puts things into the chromosomes of the child.
Yeah.
Very important. Very, very important. So that becomes part of his DNA. So when he sees a black person, he sees a target for elimination. So, you know, going back on the war in Angola, which is very good, what was it? Kwinekwavale. Kwinekwavale, that's right, yeah. You know, that particular war was very decisive, not just for Angola, but for the land of Azania, South Africa. That was during the time of President Ronald Reagan, around that time. And there was, I think, more than 60,000 Cuban troops there. And I met some of those Cuban troops because I lived in Cuba. You know, I speak Spanish, so I met them there. And they even showed me photographs of the tanks, everything. After defeating the SADF, South African Defense Force, SADF, in Kwinekwavale, what was supposed to happen, and this is a mistake that we made, they were supposed to say, now, since they were defeated here in Angola, let us proceed to the land of Azania, just to shake things up a little bit. Because you see, there's something about negotiations, and that is, in order to negotiate productively, you need to have leverage.
Yeah.
And you see, that victory was leverage. So if there were 60,000 troops in the land of Azania, that would have been leverage. And negotiations based on that leverage would have been more productive. Sorry. But we did not do that. For some reason, we did not do that. I listened to President Zuma talk about the the history of the negotiations, and he was speaking at the Zondo Commission. He made some very interesting remarks. He said they sent a team to go to America to do fundraising for the ANC. And then they sent another team to UK to draft the Constitution, to work on the Constitution. You know, I started saying, what do you expect? England, they are the former colonizers, the former slave masters. America, they are the former slave masters. They brutalized our African forebears. So you see, this thing was tainted right in the beginning. I don't have evidence for this, but I believe that those people or some of the people who were involved in the negotiations were bought. Because, you know why I say that? Because I think there is a big secret around it. There is the conspiracy of silence around the 1994 elections. When I landed here from exile in Canada, I wanted to write, it was after I had written an article about Lancaster Agreement in Zimbabwe, and I wanted to write the similar article about the 1994 agreement. And you know something, when I was doing the research, I could not find the minutes of the negotiations.
What?
But it's interesting, if you have to do Google, you will get something that says, I don't know, something like Pretoria minutes or something like that. But when you read, there are no minutes there. All that you read is just the point form decisions that we agreed to do this, we agreed to do that and stuff. There is no discourse. There is also what they call a Grootskir minutes. Even that one also, nothing. It's just point form. So there is a conspiracy. There is an apparent conspiracy of silence about it. Now, if something is good, why would you hide it? Why would you hide? Like the Lancaster Agreement of Zimbabwe is full of detail. It has got full minutes. You can tell who said what. Like, for example, Joshua Nkomo was the leader of the negotiations, and somewhere, Robert Mugabe, there was a time when he didn't want to become part of the negotiations on that agenda item that they cannot discuss land. And Zimbabwe was not, so Mugabe was not comfortable with that aspect. You see that? But you've got full story. Zimbabwean people have got full disclosure about the negotiations of Lancaster Agreement. And you can even Google that on the internet. You will find that document in PDF format. South Africa does not have that.
We always say that there's one problem with the so-called transparency. It is the points of duress that are never spoken about. So two things happened in South Africa and Zimbabwe. Before we got independence in Zimbabwe, Rhodesia was under UN sanctions. And in South Africa, you're also under UN sanctions. What the Western countries never say in public is that if you want us to release our sanctions on this colony, on the new colony, on the new country, you need to accept reconciliation. One of the major reasons why the Zimbabweans were forced, even though they had militarily won the battle on the battlefield when they bombed the petrol tanks of the Rhodesians, is that they were told that if you want trade with your country and the West, and you want us to give you the technology you need, the machinery you need, and the loans you need, you guys are going to have to accept reconciliation, and you have to keep the white people holding the property because they're the ones that are going to create jobs. They did the same to South Africa.
Yeah.
If you want us to remove these sanctions that have made the Boers fall, because that's what they said, that the Boers fell because of the sanctions. They don't talk about the wars because they want you to believe in their invincibility. They got defeated. So they say, if you want us to trade with you, if you want us to give you loans, if you want us to give you money and investment to build your country, you have to accept the property rights that currently exist, and you have to accept non-racialism, which is the maintenance of the colonial order. Now remember that the people you're negotiating with, America is the biggest colonizer on earth. It's not a democracy. It's Indian land that is occupied by Anglo-Saxons who have continued to murder and kill, and they've actually made extinct the people that lived there.
Yeah.
That's not a country. That is a criminal empire. That is the Nazis that are still living in the flesh today. And if you give them the chance, they would want South Africa to be the same. And that's why the issue of Cape independence is a threat. Because once they establish a Cape province, they're going to give it nuclear weapons like they did with Israel.
Yep.
And they're going to make it a little Israel in Africa and use it to terrorize and take the rest of the land from the whole of South Africa, slowly but surely, like what they did with Palestine.
Yes, but the interesting thing is this. Israel has got nuclear weapons, right?
Yes.
No question about it. And I think they're the only one in the Middle East.
And they're the ones that assisted the Boers to get nuclear weapons
Yeah, they
in South
did.
Africa.
No, you're right. They did. But check this out. You see, I'm sure you've heard Israelis say that the Israeli government saying that they can wipe Gaza out of the map. You remember that?
Yes.
Using nuclear weapons. But actually, they can't do it. You know why? Because once they drop a nuclear bomb.
Can you speak to Mike?
Oh, sorry.
That's important information.
It's very important.
Yes.
Marcos, So if Israel was to drop a nuclear bomb in Gaza, it would destroy Gaza and Israel. Because remember, nuclear works like that, right? Nuclear is only effective if there is a long distance
Between you and the enemy.
between you and the target. So even if Western Cape was to become free, independent, I'm just hypothetical, and they get nuclear weapons there, and then they use them, no, it will wipe out us and them. So it's not feasible. But the most important thing is that at a fundamental level, we need to change the Constitution.
Yeah.
And the Constitution will not be changed by negotiation. I think that's a very important point.
Yeah.
I like the fact that MK Party, Zuma, when he talked, he says that MK wants to take power not by a bullet, but by ballot, right? The Niger is the bullet, but for us here it's going to be a ballot. So I thought that was quite wise for him to say that. Personally, I see former President Zuma in the role of MK. I see him as umbelethisi, mupepisi, a midwife. That's how I see him. I see him as someone who's facilitating the birthing of this child, this MK child, right? And then after, a midwife is very critical, eh? Yes, the midwife is a determinant of the existence of the child. So, and once that is done, that mission is done, then you're going to have a leadership now that must grow out from this new child. And I like the concept of mutopo. Mabele. You take mabele, they take mabele, they make it wet, they put it in a bag, that red reddish old bag, sack, and then this mabele will start sprouting. That sprout is the mtombo, right? So that is the organic germination of leadership. But we're going to need young leadership there. It's going to be very critical, the new generation. And of course, I hear that Mokgwe, I don't know, I have not confirmed this, but I understand that he has crossed the floor to Mkoto.
Wow.
So, and I have great respect for Mokgwe, because Mokgwe has got a very strong sense of moral code. isn't it? It's very, very key. He's got a strong sense of moral. We need that so that he can, lead the charge. So maybe he can become the administrator of this country. I think this country must just go under administration.
I find it interesting, though, how Zuma has not left the ANC.
Yes, interesting.
He's waiting for them to purge him out of the ANC.
Yeah.
He's waiting for them to make the decision to expel him out of the ANC because he knows that it will be a moral victory and it will take with him a big chunk of the ANC.
And it will also be like the nuclear bomb. Remember the distance thing. You see that?
And then quickly, I'm so sad. The time is going so fast.
Marco.
With the Israel and this, because I want us to go to that court order thing, ne?
Okay, the ICJ, yeah.
Yes, because, from just like my ignorant and selfish side, is asking myself, why is the government so organized when it's time to go protect other people outside of us? There's so many things that have happened in South Africa, so many crimes, even Phoenix Massacre. There are things that have happened here where black people have died in numbers.
Yeah.
And what we've seen with this process is that the government actually does know how to take action and does know the processes. So how come there's been no processes against more Rupert or the people who have monopolized the economy and the people who, you know what I'm saying? Where are those?
And you ask a very brilliant question.
Yes.
But the government of South Africa is preparing for a future that it can see. Everybody can see that the West is going to continue to utilize force and to utilize military power to defeat countries that are not standing with their policies or not acquiescing to what they want. They see it. The number of military bases of the Americans that are being put on the African continent, war is coming. Countries are going to be attacked. What happened to Libya is going to happen. And South Africa is not immune to that. And that is why you see them taking the action that they're taking now. What annoys me, 2 seconds and I'll be done. What annoys me is that the Zimbabwean government had an opportunity to do what South Africa is doing before South Africa did it on the issue of the sanctions that have killed more people. Genocide, more Zimbabweans have died, 1 million Zimbabweans have died, bad health care, bad water because of illegal sanctions. But the Zimbabwean government was coward. In its trying to please and appease the West in what is called re-engagement, they decided to wait. South Africa went and did it because South Africa realizes that these Westerners are not playing. They are coming to take this continent by force or by negotiation. And that's why South Africa is preparing for that eventuality. The Russians and the Chinese, they might fight for Africa, but Africa can't depend on the Russians and the Chinese fighting for them.
But let me just come to that point. Look at a country like Syria. So America decided to engineer a regime change in Syria. And what does Syria do? They go to Russia and ask for help from Putin. What does Putin do? He brings his war machines to Syria. And he says to America, we won't allow you to overthrow Syria. And they brought one of the most sophisticated defense, missile defense called the S-400. Yes, the S-400 is very powerful. The S-400 can see a missile at a distance of 600 kilometers. That's from here to KZ to Durban. It can see what's happening there. And it can fire there at 400 kilometers. And so America has got very sophisticated jets, but they are scared to death to fly over Syria's defense. And that's why Syria is there today. When America wanted to overthrow Venezuela, that's what Venezuela did. They went to Russia because they were inspired by what Putin did in Syria. And what does Putin do? He sends 2 Tu-160. These are the biggest jets on the planet. And that jet can fly from Moscow to North America without refueling. Hey!
With nuclear weapons.
With nuclear weapons. And I remember watching CNN when these they were all scrambling on the screen. They say, hey, America, Russian, these jets, what? But that's all that they could say. They could not do anything. So that tells you right there that, you see, the colonizer does not understand discourse, but they do understand force. So we have an opportunity. We are members of BRICS. Russia can install S-400 right here. Right here. They can install S-400 right here. I know there's U.S. military base in Botswana. And I mean, America is being defeated in Ukraine as we speak. Exactly. As we speak. As we speak. So the moral of the story here is that we don't have to be cowards. Yes. We have to be strong. The land is ours. Nobody should tell us about our land. No. Definitely not. Thokoza Makhulu.
Oh, Rutendo.
Well, I would like to close and say that if MK is going to come and try and play this game, they've got to play it in real terms.
Yeah.
Our young black South Africans need to start getting military training. Let's stop nonsense of being surrounded by security companies that are Indian, security companies that are white, but there are no black security companies, and black people are not being militarized. Black people in South Africa have got to become militarized. Yeah. And this has to be done now, not tomorrow. This nonsense of white security officers acting and policing black people, which is happening more and more. I even been to police roadblocks where there are private security companies as part of the roadblock. Who are those people policing the South Africans? And when did we get comfortable with white people policing black people once again? Black people have got to get military training. This notion that we're a rainbow nation is a nonsense story because everybody else is armed except blacks. Blacks are drinking, they're having sex, they're dancing. We have got to stop being comfortable being protected by those who took our land. We've got to stop being comfortable with being protected by those who are holding our property. And we've got to become more concerned about ensuring that when we need to take our land, we have the capacity. The SNDF is infiltrated. The whites are in there. The Indians are in there. We need black people to have their own military capacity outside. This is the truth. Otherwise, without that, you will never take the land, and they will oppress you, and we saw that in Phoenix. We saw that in white suburbs where black people were being asked about their right to get into white communities, and they were being barred from their own homes because they didn't have firearms. It's time to get firearms. And to fire all those white people in police stations who prohibit black people from getting firearms. You need to understand that there's a system. At the police stations, the departments that deal with firearms are manned by white people who are there to make sure that black people do not get firearms. The bureaucracy at Pretoria, when you want your firearm license, is being made sure that there's still a brother bond that makes sure that black people are not armed. And if you're armed, you've got an illegal firearm. We've got to wake up. This is again comes back to the lawyers who make rules, the lawyers who make laws, the lawyers who make policies. Black people have to wake up. It's time to get prepared. This issue of Western Cape independence, these guys are armed there. But the question is, if they're armed, what about our people? Are they armed enough to be able to resist that? Yeah. This is not supposed to be spoken about, but it has to be. Because the only counter to violence is having an ability to defend yourself from the violence.
Oh, this episode is... Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming through. The hour went too quickly, and I can't believe that I have to close this. But thank you very, very much. Guys, thank you so, so much for continuously blessing us. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you again for all the donations. The details are on screen. Please continue doing the right thing, paying your tithes so that we can give you more education, more learning, more programs so that we can reprogram our DNA as African people. See you again next time.
Who are you when all you were has been diluted by lies and white lines cancelling out all that which has been written of your history? Why do you look at yourself as a mystery? Doesn't the sun shine because you open your eyes? Doesn't the moon stay situated within the same stars your DNA sparkles off? Your spirit knows that surely corner into e off. Buza umoya so you may return to being well off. Because spiritually you are rich, yet your ancestors cry because you are out of reach. But yours is to command all elements while God takes inspiration from the very mirror she looked at to become. Remember who you are and never finish just when they think that with you they are done.